Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, guys. We are so excited to be here, and we are so excited that you guys are here. We're ready to Mythbustin', right? Woo! Ready? Yes? Okay, good. All right, good. Lots of energy. I know. I realize that it's Wednesday afternoon, and it's 5 o'clock, and other people are drinking, but you are making the good decision to be here, right? Get the extra knowledge. It's always good, right?
We do want to add, though, that this is a perfect presentation to make into a drinking game.
Oh. Yeah, but we
so
didn't bring
when
it.
you
I'm
go
sorry.
and rewatch it at home,
That's right.
that was one of the limitations. It would have been really difficult to do, but feel free to kind of create it your own. So because there is going to be a lot of myth busting, or anytime you see something that you've experienced too, that's when you say drink. So, so feel free to shout out.
All right, so what we want to do in this presentation today really is to help you separate some facts from fiction here. And so, the ability to be able to see which one of these things are myths inside of your organization, what's some of the facts that you really need to know about, and how to figure it out inside of your company. That's going to be the most important thing here. So we really want to focus. We're going to introduce ourselves in just a second, but we do want to focus on what's in it for you. And really, that comes down to these 4 main compartments. And the first thing is really understanding which myths are common in your organizations. Now, we've had a couple of threads running on the IT Pro network. So who's a member of the Yammer.com Office 365 network? Put your hands up. Woo, woo, woo.
All right,
Thank you, people.
That's good representation.
Good. Yeah, it's good. And then on the Microsoft Ignite network, the conference network, who's a member of that? Yeah. All right. All right, and who are the people who are not a member of any Yammer network? Put your hands up and be proud. All right, okay, all right. We are going to convert you. No, it's all good. It's all good, but anyway. But no, it's good to know. But we did have a couple of threads running on those different networks so that we could get some of the top myths from you folks. And so we really, we found it important to figure out, what are the things that you hear about a lot inside of your organizations, and how can we sort of overcome some of those things. And then we're going to move on from those myths and talk about a little bit in terms of the strategy for dealing with those myths. It's oftentimes inside of your organization, these things get perpetuated. So really thinking about what it is that we can do to overcome those barriers, how we can prove some success there, but really think about overcoming those myths.
Absolutely. And then we're going to kind of talk about what are some ways to measure and showcase success. So along with every project that's out there, whether it's in IT or whether it's within a business unit, you always want to be thinking about, okay, how do we prove and showcase success here? And then also we're going to just even talk about some of the truths about Yammer and about the network and everything like that. So
it's all good.
It is.
It's going to be a fun time. And the clicker's not working, so you're going to just have to bear with us. My name is Naomi Moneypenny. Yes, my name really is Moneypenny. All right, we got that? Yes. All right, thank you. Yes.
It's not a fake accent.
I know, and it killed me. Like Pradeep in the keynote on Monday, right? I don't know if anybody saw me on Twitter, but he's going, no, we're not James Bond, right? We're all the Q in James Bond, if like for the IT professionals in the audience, right? And I was like, really? Really? He's going to make a James Bond joke? Really? I'm like, yeah, okay. It's like, some of us are Miss Moneypenny all of the time, right? It's one of those things. But yes, it is my real name. I am an astrophysicist by background, but you do not need to be a rocket scientist in order to deploy enterprise social. Happy about that? Yes. Okay. All right, good. My real job is Chief Technology Officer at Synexi, or it's a ManyWorlds. So our company is out in Houston, Texas. And one of the things that we specialize in is machine learning and knowledge and expertise discovery from Yammer and SharePoint and other systems inside of your organization, figuring out the expertise that you have from the way that people are contributing and adding things to the network. I advise a lot on enterprise social, and hopefully I know many of you from some of the Yammer networks, and you may have read blogs and other things that I've done. And I'm also an Office 365 MVP. I enjoy a lot in terms of talking about this enterprise social stuff, but what I am truly, truly passionate about, and we'll have at length, long discussions, as many of you know, actually in the audience, about how you can drive value from information and actually derive value from information inside of your organizations. I thought it was really cool at the keynote, right? We were talking about every business now is a software business. Is it resonating? Yes. Every piece of information inside of your organizations, right? That's the stuff I really get passionate about, how you can use technology and really make it happen inside of your organization. And my lovely co-presenter.
Well, actually, first though, but if they don't get enough of you in this session, I think, do you have another session tomorrow?
I do have another session tomorrow.
You
Thank
do.
you for mentioning that,
Yeah,
Chad.
absolutely. I believe it's tomorrow at 1.
1:30.
Oh, sorry, at 1:30.
1:30, social intranet. So if you're interested in learning how to put Yammer inside of SharePoint and embed it and with all the tools and technologies that we have available, that's what we're going to do tomorrow afternoon. So please come to that session too if you want.
And even though, I mean, she has touched on even why you should listen to her about some of those topics, she was also named the #1 most influential person for Office 365. So. So I don't have all those accolades, so I just saw pictures of my kids on my side. But so I'm Chad Slipka. I'm Director of Customer Success for Office 365 for the Central Region of the United States, which we are currently in. I am based in Minnesota. I am a proud Gopher. I am not as proud of a Wild fan right now, for those of you in the audience that are Blackhawk fans and were able to watch the drubbing again last night. But I've been with Yammer actually for a little over 4.5 years. And in that time, I've always been focused on the customer success role. And now that in the past year, we've taken on also focusing on Office 365 customer success. And I'll touch a little bit more on that later on in the presentation. But in all of my roles, so I am a geek, so like Naomi, I left that part on my slide. I have my 2 alma maters are up there on the slide. I know there are some people from Cargill here. I spent a lot of time at Cargill previously in my career, but I've always looked at my job as a geek as bringing technology and my passion and love for technology to the business and showcasing how technology can help meet business objectives. As you can see by my wonderful children on there, they keep us very busy. Daddy-daughter dance, Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, baseball, everything like that. So definitely in this whole new world of working like a network and being always constantly connected, having flexibility and having tools that allow you to be flexible when you have a family and doing things like that, a lot of what we're talking about today has actually helped in relation to, how do you do all these different things and then also still maintain a happy family life.
Oh, so nice. So we're going to talk a little bit about the common myths inside of your organization. We have some top 10 myths for you. We want to go through and think about these different articles and these different areas. And so with myths, it's kind of an interesting fact, right? Is thinking about what does it mean to be a myth inside of your organization and with enterprise social. And the first one I want to start off with is really enterprise social is not a fad, right? It is not a fad. Okay, so that's one of those things that I hear a lot about. And does anybody else feel that way? It's like it's a fad. If I just keep my head down inside of the organization for long enough, this too shall pass, right? Have you heard this inside of your organization? Kind of got that feeling. So one of these issues really is thinking about enterprise social in terms of a moniker is maybe not the best way of talking about it, right? So there are some organizations, I used to work for Shell, for example. It's a very conservative type of culture, a very large company, right? You say enterprise social, the executives is like, I don't want people to be more social, right? I want people sitting at their desk, like doing their thing, right? Not talking to people and wasting time, right? So it's really thinking about, okay, how can I get over this moniker? What works inside of your organization? And I know this week we've heard a lot about teamworking and collaboration, right? And that's really the essence of what we're trying to do with Yammer. So when we're thinking about enterprise social, really what we're trying to do is better teamworking, faster networking inside of the organization, faster time to getting the information that you need to get your job done. There's a couple of things that we've seen. There's some McKinsey studies out there from the Global Institute in 2012. It says that the average knowledge worker is spending 28 hours a week collaborating, looking for information, sending emails, trying to get the stuff done that you need inside of your organization. Which means that in the average 40-hour work week, we're really looking at, oh, hey, let's see, 28 hours, I'm spending more than half of my work week trying to figure out the stuff that I need to get my real work done. Does that sound familiar? Yeah? Yes, exactly. So it's one of those issues, right? So what we're trying to do with Yammer and Enterprise Social is to think about how can we get that information more effectively, faster inside of our organizations so that we can actually really get our jobs done. So, myth busted.
Drink. So, has anyone heard of this one? Yammer is just another thing to check. Even talking about a little bit what Naomi was just even saying with, utilizing collaboration. People are spending so much time trying to find information. So I always viewed myself as being successful as a customer success manager when one of the users didn't have to think, it's 4 o'clock and, oh man, I forgot to check Yammer today. That's not what we want this to do. And as you think of the messaging of this week and of this conference, it's a lot more about how are we talking about all these products and services working together? How do we become more collaborative and not even just focusing on this tool? And that's why even we've had some conversations where it's like, there wasn't like a specific SharePoint message. There wasn't a specific Yammer message in some of the things. Because the focus is on, no, we're talking about collaboration as a whole. And as we'll talk about a little bit, sometimes collaboration to me is different to Naomi, is different to you guys here in this audience, and different to the people within your organization. The other piece is it's going to be, we are going to continue to iterate on these pieces as well. So it's not, we really, really don't want it to be just another thing to check.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. So in that vein, it's really, the other myth we want to bust here is Yammer is not a real business system, right? You heard that one? You might have heard it inside of your organizations, oftentimes from some of our IT professional colleagues. We won't say that too badly. But it's one of the issues there is the Yammer has this perception inside of your organization that it's just one of these kind of consumer sites and it just came into your network and it's not really a real business communication system. Well, guess what, folks? It really is, right? We're really thinking about how we can do integration across lots of different systems, and that's a big issue inside of our organizations. So if you're running anything from SAP to Salesforce to Dynamics to SharePoint, you can really think about how to enliven the conversation to get engagement inside of your organizations and to really act as if that conversation is happening across all of those different platforms. So right now, Yammer is a fantastic way to actually take that conversation, understand the content that's going on, and being able to transport those conversations into lots of different business systems. So Yammer itself, we can think of it as kind of a conversation engine inside of the organization, and then it plugs into the wider Office 365 productivity suite. So really thinking about how can we position this inside of our organizations. It's a real business system, and it's something that we can all use, and it's very accessible for our end users.
So another one that we often get is talking about executives don't use Yammer. They don't want to be on there. It's not timely. They don't have time for it. Well, if you've been to some of the other sessions this week, there's been plenty on adoption. Come by our booth where there's a Yammer booth specifically. There's an O365 adoption booth, and where we talk about a lot of the different methods and materials and ways to drive adoption, drive usage. One of the most important things is for executives to be involved in it. And we would like to say that there are plenty of examples where executives have found success with using Yammer. And one of the key things is that it's ways that they are finding ways to communicate with areas of their workforce and people that they've never really been able to before. So they get to, and which means that they get to hear things firsthand and they get to hear things more quickly. Now, there are some kind of caveats or some recommendations with executives where, many times they're very used to either someone writing a lot of the communications for them or it going through 5, 6, 7 iterations or views of other people that kind of tweak the message before it goes out. And so sometimes that can scare them a little bit, and so you do have to sometimes give a little bit of hand-holding and coaching as to, hey, that's okay. But one of the most important pieces to that is it's no longer just going to be a push of information. It's not just the mantra or the memo that's coming from the exec down to the staff. You want it to be about engaging and asking questions and allowing for feedback. Otherwise, people aren't going to really respond, which oftentimes you get execs say, well, fine, I pushed this, and no one replied or said anything other than, good job, or, wow, thank you, this is only here and only at this company can I receive information like this. That's not what you want to do. You want to welcome people to interact. So along that vein, it is important to be coaching the users in general that if execs are out there, you want to engage with them. You want to challenge them. And it's if the messaging and the questions and the conversations are happening there, it's anyone is allowed to talk and is fair game. So it's not just focused on this is the messaging and piece that's coming down for us. And kind of along that vein of they have the ability to now talk to people that they haven't been able to before, is this myth that Yammer is only for knowledge workers. And first of all, kind of have an issue with the term knowledge workers, but for most people in IT industry, we kind of know what that means. That means it's someone in front of a desk that's got a computer that has a mailbox. And the reason why I really don't like it is the negative connotation that if you don't have an email box, or if you're not sitting in front of your desk all day, that you don't have a lot of knowledge to provide for the company. Which I think we all can probably say that that's not very likely, and if it was true, then why would the person even be employed? So Yammer does allow, and we have a lot of customers that are using, that do allow for Yammer for frontline workers. And what we have seen is that this is provided, whether it's in a retail situation where, hey, they've been able to identify packaging issues on brand new products and even get a response and get a change done within a week, to production and plant facilities where they've been able to identify safety issues and share that globally that, hey, here's something that you need to look out for, here's the way to fix it so we can have safe environments at work. And if you think about it, if Yammer didn't exist in those cases, typically if the person did run it up the chain, it's exactly that. The message is going up the chain and around and then down, and then maybe it gets broadcast out, where this is providing a platform to allow for all workers, everyone who has knowledge, and whether they are sitting in front of a desk or sitting in front of, sitting in front of a forklift, to provide value to the company.
Mm-hmm. All right, knowledge management strategy. Okay, this is a good one. So I have this question a lot, and I've seen some of the issues this week too. Anybody else confused about Office 365 groups versus Yammer? Yes? Okay, all right, okay.
Isn't I think there's another myth out there
I think there is.
Office 365 groups is replacing Yammer.
I know, I've heard that one too.
I'm not
pretty sure it's not true. Yeah, it's not true. So let's talk a little bit about knowledge management strategy and really thinking about these Office 365 groups as well as Yammer. So the first thing I want to talk about is really understanding your knowledge management strategy in your organization. You probably already have one, right? You already have a knowledge management strategy? Yes? Some folks? Oh, gosh. And if you don't, all right, if you guys don't, then you should have one. I'm sorry to say that. If you don't have one, you should. So one of the issues there really is understanding what kinds of conversations, what kinds of content do we want to curate over time, right? It's really important to think about what kind of knowledge we want to retain inside of the organization. Depending on the kinds of companies that you are, if you're growing very quickly, if you've got a lot of baby boomers in your organization, the sort of knowledge management retention strategy, how do we protect the intellectual capital of the organization? So it's an important part of understanding that. One of the things there is to really understand how can you use a new technology to augment that. We have to understand that knowledge management is that umbrella that all of these conversations and this content is all curated under. So if we think about that, then we can take that model and examine what we've talked about this week in terms of Office 365 groups. The first thing I want to talk about is that Office 365 groups is not a replacement for Yammer, right? Just want to make that very, very clear. Did everybody hear me?
Myth
yes?
busted.
Totally busted, all right? Not a replacement for Yammer. Are we happy about that? Yes. All right, good. So the second thing is that Office 365 groups, it's a different level of technology, or a different level of service is probably the better way to put it, okay? And so that service is really about understanding how we can reconcile what we call security groups in Active Directory and thinking about how it is that we distribute team and collaboration and content, right? And we're really marrying these two concepts together. People are in a group together, right? It's a teamwork. They maybe have an AD profile associated with it. They may have a security group that you already have existing inside of your Active Directory. And how you marry this concept of there's people in this group and they're communicating and collaborating on a certain area, and they have content, they have conversations, they have calendars, they have schedules, they have all of this stuff that needs to come together. So just as we have these blurring of these boundaries between applications that we use, right? So now we have Word and we have PowerPoint, right? Let's take a very simple example. Now, what's the difference between Word and PowerPoint these days, right? Hardly anything, right? They're just words on a page, right? Words and pictures on a page. And if I just orient the page a certain way around, I get a certain result, and I orient it the other way, I get another result. And so we've seen that over time, the applications, the boundaries between these things are really blurring. And so the idea of Office 365 groups is to take that, but on the next level. It's the idea of conversations come from anywhere, whether they're coming from Yammer, they're coming from email, they're coming from inside of your organization, maybe on an instant messaging platform. And then thinking about content sources inside of your organization. Whether the content is coming from SharePoint, it's coming from OneDrive, it's coming from Yammer, it's coming from whatever services, maybe Dynamics or other line of business services inside of your organization. And so what you're trying to do is unify all of these things into one hub for people and manage it with a security domain around it, because that's what's really important when it comes to content. But understand that we're surrounding the content and conversation around specific users and the permissions that they have. So the concept of Office 365 groups is it's above Yammer, it's above email, it's above SharePoint, it's above OneDrive, right? It's really this next layer inside of the organization. So don't think about it as a replacement. You just think of it as people are using the sources and the content channels, the services that they want to consume, and that we're really thinking about Office 365 groups coming together as a hub to bring it together. Is that clear? Yes?
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right. Okay, good. Busted. I like that. That's right. So I wanted to mention that because it's really important to understand from just a future-facing direction what we're going to see this with Microsoft, right, and how we want to develop this inside of our organization. So thinking about what that means to you, even if you're on premises right now, is thinking about the Active Directory groups that you have, the way that you currently curate people into groups, whether it's specific teams, it's specific projects, it's security groups, it's roles, all of those kinds of things. We want to take that security concept and be able to apply it to all the content and conversations that are going on. So plug that kind of idea into your longer range thinking in terms of knowledge management. Because we want to, again, think about what knowledge is important to the organization, what is it that we need to curate inside of our organizations going forward, and then really think about how it is that we manage those conversations, manage that knowledge, and what kind of processes and technologies that we use to support it. So, knowledge management strategy, myth busted. All right, next one. We're going to talk about implementation and management, another favorite of mine. All right, do we think that implementation and management inside of Yammer is hard? Anybody? Opinions? No? Yes, okay, all right. So there's a few things here. The technology itself is not difficult, right? So we've seen a lot of reports from Gartner that 80% of the time inside of enterprise social systems and deploying enterprise social systems, it's really about change and culture management inside of our organization. It is not a technology management project, right? And so it's very hard. Most of us are IT professionals in the room. Yes? Okay, lots of head nods, lots of noise. Okay, so it really tells us that it's not the technology project. We're not trying to organize things around helping roll out a large-scale system inside of our organization. So really thinking about what it is that we need to do that's different inside of our companies. So the implementation that we talk about is change, it's behaviors, it's all this fluffy stuff that we might not be familiar with as technology professionals. But it's the thing that we've been talking about for the longest time that's really important, right? So it's change with IT systems and understanding what it is that we're trying to drive from business results and how we get those behaviors inside of our organization. So implementation and management, difficult one.
So this is one that still does come up. And I'll be very clear. Yammer is not and will not ever be on-prem. But that said, are there ways to bring Yammer into your on-prem systems, whether that's SharePoint or whether that's some of your own internal systems, some of which Naomi touched on before? And that is still very feasible, and that will continue to be feasible. Whether you're utilizing Yammer Embed to do that, to bring it in, or whether you want to utilize the API to do it in a little bit more even creative or specific way. So one of the main reasons why that it will not be on-prem is very similar to, say, why Delve isn't going to be on-prem. It's the ability that we're able to rapidly iterate on the product would not be the same if it were an on-prem solution. So it's really about a process, and for the other piece, so with the acquisition, those of you, I know a lot of you said you're already Yammer customers. Hopefully that you know that next weekend that Yammer is going to be moving into the Microsoft data centers. So,
yay! Woo.
Yay!
So happy.
So that's something that's on the road, that has been on the roadmap for quite some time, and is one of the building blocks that is necessary as we're talking about all of these different integrations and even the theme of this week. But building these productivity tools even more closely integrated and less being focused on one specific product or workload that you may often hear the terminology, and just focusing much more on productivity as a whole.
All right. Identity management. Okay, another tough one, right? I always get the tough ones. I don't know how that works out, but yeah, it did. That's all right.
I picked.
Yeah, you picked. That's true. That's true. Tad had some decisioning power over that. It's funny that. Okay, so I wanted to ask you guys. So who's running Yammer Basic? Anybody running Yammer Basic? Okay, admit it. It's okay. It's
Yeah,
okay.
free version.
It's all good. The free version. Yes, all right. We call it by the real name. All right, so that's the real name. By. All right.
Freemium.
Freemium. Yes. Okay. So that's good. And so the rest of you guys are running Yammer Enterprise? Yes. Okay, all right, and some folks are not running Yammer at all, it looks like. Okay, all right, that's good to know. Okay, good to know. All right, so this is one of the things I hear a lot about in terms of it's difficult to manage identities inside of Yammer and making sure that it's working with your Active Directory systems. And so that is a concern inside of a lot of organizations, and so really thinking about there's a few paths that you can go through. The first one is that Office 365 now has this simplified sign-on between Yammer and Office 365. So if you're using Office 365 licenses, if you have your domain up there and you have the email address, perhaps oftentimes people have moved that workload up into the cloud, then you can actually use simplified sign-on with Yammer now. So that's a great way to be able to get started. The other way is you can actually federate your Active Directory. So if you have your Active Directory on-prem, you can actually federate it up with Yammer so that your users are being synchronized. You'll use a process called desync to do that. And on this batch job will basically run every few hours or whenever is making sense for your inside of your organization. The third option is things where you have people on, sort of inside of your organization who are kind of users without email. Do you have a bunch of those? Bunch of folks? Yeah, okay. So that kind of scenario is an interesting one, right? We want to think about how we can really light up those kind of that part of the organization. So oftentimes those folks don't even have an email address. They've never had to have an email address because, hey, they didn't need to communicate with anybody, right? So it's kind of weird to think about it now. But really thinking about how we can synchronize those folks from your Active Directory. So you can use this user without email scenario. You can use Azure Active Directory. That's a great way to be able to do it. But you can also manage it on-prem. So you can use ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services, with using an employee ID that has a different UPN or something else that you use as your unique identifier inside of your organization. And then you can actually put all that information together and synchronize it up to the cloud. So we can definitely do the identity management in Yammer. Maybe it's not as smooth as perhaps we'd always want it to be, but the directory synchronization services are there, and they're getting better and better every single day with the Azure Active Directory on premises too.
And even the Yammer embed can take advantage of the identity being passed through to it automatically, which is something that's been recent.
Exactly.
So we often hear as well that Yammer is not secure. And not just even Yammer, just the cloud is not secure. Standing at the booth the last few days, I've had a lot of customers come up and still talk about how, we're still somewhat cloud averse as a company. And so, as with all Office 365 products, Microsoft takes security of our customer data very seriously. Those of you already, as we touched on, Yammer is moving to the Microsoft Data Center. We are ISO 27001 compliant. Whoops, sorry about that.
It's all right. I don't know what it is. I think it's just keep talking.
All right.
We're HIPAA compliant.
We are HIPAA compliant. We're working towards the HIPAA compliance. Sorry, we're not quite HIPAA compliant yet. And we are working on the DPAs, so the Data Privacy Acts. Sorry. At Microsoft, we have a lot of acronyms. But we're working on those, and the target is for those to be completed by this calendar year. So with everything, the most important thing that I always like to touch on regarding security is what security policies do you already have in place within your organization? Do you have a classification of data within your company? Do your users know about the classification of data? And when you do that, have you classified, what's being done and taking place on Yammer? Does that meet a certain classification of the data? And so therefore, that should help drive the behaviors. So oftentimes, no matter what, if it's Yammer, SharePoint, anything, even IM, having those policies and talking about what type of information is being shared should be a part of the entire process that you think about security, usage, policies, everything. It's all wrapped as part of it.
All right, does anybody out there think that their organization is too siloed or too slow for enterprise social or adopting these kind of new systems? All right, big hand wave at the back there. All right, all right, all right. I see that.
And who do you work for? No,
yeah, exactly. No. We don't do public embarrassment. No, it's a shame-hatting later. No, it's all good. But it's understanding that, the conservative cultures are oftentimes the ones that are reticent to adopt new technologies inside of organizations. But really, I've seen a lot of great examples of how that has actually worked in lots of conservative cultures. So there are a few customer examples that we can pick up. One of them is probably one of the largest risk management companies in the world. And if they are not conservative, then I don't know who is, right? It's all about risk management and insurance inside of their business. So I look at Aon, for example. They have about 90,000 users, and they're all using Yammer right now. They're actually actively engaged in building out new communities in their Yammer organization and really looking at understanding what it is that they can grab across the different boundaries inside of their company. Another good example I like to mention all the time is actually the European Commission, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I always say, I'm from Europe originally, so there's nothing slower than government, right? So there's nothing slower than a coalition of European governments, right? So if you can't be faster than those guys, then, it's like, yeah, if they can do it, then anybody can do it, right? So it's understanding really that, those organizations, they have about 70 external-facing platforms before at the European Commission. And they've consolidated down to Yammer. And basically their implementation, which was done on somewhat of a shoestring budget, I have to say, just a couple of people who are full-time employees, and looking at how they've been able to implement inside of their organization, they have a long list of things, everything from being able to share ideas, being able to share feedback very quickly inside of the organization, have a channel for management to be able to communicate with others, and then really looking at how to consolidate all these different communication systems. So I think it's been a really great example of understanding of if you can even have a coalition of governments coming together and have people communicating across lots of geographical boundaries and lots of language boundaries, then, any organization, right? Not too slow, you're not too siloed, you're not too conservative to adopt enterprise social.
Myth busted.
Yes.
So I know this slide is in here just for some people in the audience.
Yes.
Who we often talk about collaboration fairies. And, the chagrin of my young daughter that fairies do not exist, including collaboration fairies. So one of the problems is that, you want to set up a network and kind of field the dreams. You build it, they will come. That doesn't exactly happen.
It doesn't.
And a lot of you have heard Erin Grotz speak before. So she's community manager and part of internal communications at Conagra Foods. And this was on stage last year at an event where she kind of implored the audience. And she goes, "This is really hard." And I've worked with Erin for quite some time, and it's very true. You can't just build it and not continue to cultivate it. Mm-hmm. One of the ways, maybe whether it's an official official champion community or not, that's one of the keys to find people within your organizations in the different groups that to kind of pitch as a leadership opportunity, whether it's part of their official job or not, but to talk about the importance of this. This is a way that you can show leadership within your team, within your organization. It's really, and as part of this, and in continuing to have this work and cultivate, the way that they want to encourage it is to really make this a part of the way that their company or that their groups get work done. And so whether if it's trying to, my team has even talked about this, where it's why are we spending time on our team meeting talking about, what we worked on this week? We're posting that on Yammer. So, it's a better way. How do we make ourselves even be more productive? So that's what you want to definitely rely on your champions out there who, unfortunately, are not truly fairies.
Oh. No, we're so sad. Really, there are no fairies? Are we sad? No. I have to blame Melanie for coming up with that term. So on the Microsoft Ignites network. But I was so sad. No fairies. Oh. Anyway, so clicker does not work. Okay,
no.
Give up. So I wanted to ask. So maybe we can talk about the questions at the end of the session. But I wanted you to start thinking about maybe what are some of the myths that exist inside of your organization. So try to think about those, because I'm going to ask you at the end of the session to sort of share some of those myths that inside your company. What are some of the things that you're finding to be actual barriers inside of your organization for adopting enterprise social? So those are the ones we want to know about. So we're going to move on and talk a little bit about strategies for how we can deal with myths inside of the organization and thinking about really proving out the business value.
Right. So some of the most important pieces that we're going to look at here is you really want to find and identify the right use cases that exist. You also want to try, as we touched on even earlier, how are you going to document the success? And in a lot of this is also, it's an iterative process, so you have to continue to be doing this. Talk about a little bit of awareness of what's the maturity? Where are we at in a maturity model with our usage? And then also, what are some of the appropriate metrics? Not just focusing on stat porn, that we oftentimes do, but what is the real metrics that are going to help drive business value?
So let's talk about use cases first, because that's probably the most important and fundamental part of what we can do inside of our organizations to prove out the value of enterprise social. And it may be tough to come up with some use cases straight off the bat, especially when you're first implementing inside of your company. Those first initial successes and wins inside of your organization are so important for being able to communicate the value of what it means inside of your organization. So I know oftentimes as champions, hopefully you're all here because you're champions and you believe in implementing enterprise social in your organizations. And so oftentimes we're faced with, well, where have we done this before? Or who in our industry has done this before, right? Have you had those kind of questions, right? People want to know. They don't want to take the journey by themselves. They want to know that somebody else in the industry has done it. And it's like that first step is the hardest. So the first thing I want to think about is how do we figure out the different organizational tenets for your company? So what is it, the key things inside of the culture of your organization that are really important? So I used to work in oil and gas, so safety was a big one, right? Safety was always a big thing. And we had all these safety moments inside the organization, like every time a meeting would start, if there was more than 6 people, you would have a safety moment inside of the company. And it was ingrained into the culture of the company, right? That you're going to have this kind of safety moment type of thing. So really think about what is it that's inside of your organization, what values are inside of your organization that you can latch a use case onto. So in the case of like safety, for example, if you have this kind of safety moments, or if you have other health, safety and environmental considerations that you have to worry about, it's like, how else can you think about using enterprise social to bring new life basically to an old dog, right? It's a kind of a new trick that you could use. So think about how is it that you could take that information, things that people are very familiar with inside of your organization, and empower it with a new use case for the enterprise social. The next area is really looking at what is it from a business value perspective that we're trying to acknowledge inside of the company. And so thinking about what kind of value do we want to generate to show us an actual success. And that really comes down to, again, where we are on the maturity spectrum. So if you're very early in your stages of Yammer adoption, you'll want to think about very small use cases. You're going to prove it out maybe at an individual and a team level first, but then really wanting to look to the future in terms of the big use cases, the big value cases that you want to look for. So thinking about how do we structure out the different use cases and how do we prove the business value of those use cases at each turn. The next part of this is really aligning around the objectives, right? We're aligning around the results that we're trying to get. But we need to prove our use cases and say, hey, these are the objectives inside the organization. How do we actually align with that? We want to find executive sponsors inside of the organization, right? We need to look at how we can create the objectives and look at what they're trying to do with their businesses and align those use cases to them. It's a really important part of being able to have those results and being able to align it and fit it into other people's priorities. It's not enough to be like, oh, we're just going to do better collaboration, right? Better collaboration doesn't do anything for anybody, right? It really doesn't. You have to be very specific and measurable and all those other things around what it is that you're trying to achieve. The other aspect of this is I want to sort of share around this is we really want to proactively provide the hard and soft metrics that we want to be measured on. And the reason I say this is my boss, who used to be the CIO at a large Fortune 100 company, he always says that executives don't understand, they make smaller. Okay? And so it's one of those things. If you don't proactively measure the metrics, if you don't proactively say, this is how I'm going to document success, if you don't proactively give those metrics, somebody else who doesn't understand them will assess how successful you were. Right? And that should sound pretty familiar to us in IT, right? So really thinking about how do we want to demonstrate success of our use cases and proactively being able to show some of those metrics. And we've got some examples for you. We're not going to leave you alone on that stuff, but we have some examples. But those are really the key things around how do we identify the use cases in the organization, and then thinking about going forward, what is the role of IT that we want inside of our companies? So oftentimes we're a service provider inside of the organization, and we may feel that we're kind of on the back foot a little bit, right? Sometimes it's a little bit reactive, or we may have been seen as a gatekeeper in the past. And so we want to think about how do we actually transform that relationship with the business. And one of the ideas there is being able to learn more about the business, right? They want to know, what they're thinking about. We want to know how we can actually encourage and use new technologies for them, but we need to learn a little bit more about it. So there is an opportunity in this enterprise social area to be able to identify use cases where you can really be seen as a partner, right? It's really important to be able to structure around that. So having that kind of partnering aspect is an important category there.
And one other point I would make about that is, as you all know, this is now a conference that spans multiple products, that brought multiple conferences together into one. And the role of IT isn't the only thing that changes. Even the role of Microsoft in the relationship with IT and our customers is changing. Microsoft traditionally dealt with IT and nobody else. Our role, even as customer success managers, and the changing role of the Microsoft account teams that work with each and every one of you, is to understand more about the business. We're here to help ensure that IT is successful. So going in together with IT to kind of talk to the business and understand what those business objectives are, to help ensure that the products that you guys are purchasing from us are effective and are what is needed to help improve business productivity.
So I put in here a spectrum of scenarios, and the idea here is to be able to map out some of the use cases that you have inside of your organization. So up on the y-axis there, I have the value generation. So it's really just looking kind of perspective in terms of, is this thing bigger than a breadbasket, right? Trying to scale it appropriately for the amount of value that the use case may bring. Originally, you may think about, individual, team, process. Maybe there are other productivity measures that are important to you. So thinking about those categories are along the bottom. And we're just giving you this as a framework, sort of an idea to be able to scope and map out the different use cases for your organization. So there are some quick wins in here, right? Oftentimes, things that we might want to first structure our use cases around are things that actually affect individual and team productivity. And so things like making meetings better, right? Everybody's like death by meetings, right? Inside of your organizations? Yes, okay.
Who wants more meetings?
Exactly. Anybody? No. All right. No hands went up. We don't want to say that, right? Okay. That's good. So, let's sort of thinking about how we can use meetings and do it more effectively with Yammer, thinking about how we can structure agendas together, how can we do scheduling better, thinking about how we take notes during meetings using the co-authoring part of Yammer Notes, right? So we can all be taking the notes instead of one person who gets to scribe them and forgets about it and then loses a scrap of paper that they were using or transcribes it wrong, or I don't know how many times this has happened, or, at least you can check people's understanding while they're actually using the Yammer note, right? It's important to be able to type that stuff out. You could actually all be co-authoring the notes at the same time. So if you have some misunderstandings about who's doing what and what task you got allocated suddenly that you had no idea, right? You can work it out there and then in the meeting instead of going back later on. So thinking about some of those simple wins, like making meetings better, and then supporting new systems, that's another big one, right? If you're rolling out Office 365, if you're rolling out anything inside of your company, if you're rolling out a new HR system or an SAP module or whatever it is, right? How you can put together a power user community, how you can have support groups come together inside of your organization and connect people together so that you're not getting a million calls to the help desk about how do I update, I don't know, the Power BI plugin or whatever it is for Excel, right? So maybe you can having people able to help themselves and come together a little bit. It's a great use case also for Yammer in terms of Office 365 adoption. What I like to point out here is that just being able to size out these bubbles to something that actually is meaningful for your organization. You could look at things like, how many employees are affected by it, right? It tells you a little bit in terms of what use cases you want to go after. You can also look for very high-value scenarios where it's a very small team that's involved. And oftentimes I call these things edge cases. The tendency in the past has really been to roll out collaboration systems in our organization that kind of met the needs of 80% of our user population, which means that there was always kind of 20% in our organization who had these kind of edge cases in the organization. They didn't really get their needs met. And oftentimes those folks are still there. It's oftentimes because they're a small team. They may be 10 or 20 people, or they may be a very geographically dispersed unit or some other field services area. And there may be something inside of your organization where they're still underserved. So if you're looking for opportunities of finding those edge cases inside of the organization, it's a great way oftentimes to prove out the value of a new technology because they're not already having their needs served. You're not trying to go after the core of what an existing platform is doing. You're really looking at how do I take this underserved population and extend it out. you'll want to plot out these different use cases and the scenarios because we want to be able to see what that end goal looks like or a part of the end goal looks like for your organization. It's not enough to say, oh, I just want to make, collaboration better. I want to make my meetings better. I also want to be able to think about what it is that's the highest value generation part of the scenario. So if it's things like I need to get better input from customers in terms of product lifecycle or how I do service development inside of the organization, it's the same techniques that you learn, the same behaviors you learn from a social behaviors perspective. It's the same things that are going to be applied. It's just that you need to try them out and mature with those different use cases before you get to some of those end goals and those big value generation scenarios. So if you're in the case where executives oftentimes have been sold enterprise social and they may be all excited about it and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to do this enterprise social stuff, right? But you want to prove it out first inside of your organization so that you can get to establish who it is inside of your company who is a green dot, who's a red dot, and all those other systems.
How many of you know what a green dot, red dot, yellow dot that is?
Few folks.
This is good.
All right. That's good.
So the concept has to do with green dots being people that have the same influence or have the same ideas, are behind this, are supportive of, in this case, enterprise social. Yellow dots, kind of on the fence. Red dots, those that definitely, I don't buy into it. I don't think it's needed. I don't get it. I have no cares to even understand it. And oftentimes what has typically happened is we focus a lot of our time and energy on the red dots. And really, there's a lot of diminishing returns that you get by focusing all that time and energy. And what we've seen is definitely you want to focus more of your time and energy on the green dots. Because the green dots are going to help drive more usage. They're going to help promote it. And it might bring along some of the yellow dots and turn yellow dots into green dots, so you have more of them that way. But it will help influence the red dots, or you know what? They just don't need to be a part of the equation at times.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So I'm not going to read the slide. You can thank me later. But really, it's just an example of, this is one example of how to do kind of a maturity model. And as you think about how usage within your organization is going to change over time. Now, hopefully a lot of companies have their own type of maturity models for different things that they use. If you have it, that's great. Try and adapt how Yammer Enterprise Social Collaboration fit on your own maturity model. One of the most successful ways to show success and to drive success within your organization is to not recreate the wheel, to use terminology, to use systems, to use programs and processes that already exist within your org and users are familiar with. The key thing that you do around is accepting usage and change. So oftentimes, if you have an organizational effectiveness group, you have a change management group, those are the ones that you want to employ with this. Naomi talked about earlier the Gartner stat that this type of rollout for enterprise social is really 20% technology, 80% change management. So partner with those people that are experts in that area to focus on this. Change, communication, and education. Melanie actually brought this up in a conversation earlier today. That is a key piece that is needed for this to be successful. Mm-hmm. And in some of the resources, there's even a white paper on that piece as well.
That's right. All right, so how do we get started? Any ideas? No? Okay, maybe? Woo! I like it. I like it. So the avalanche button, I like that. That's a good one. Yes. So you have that big button on your Yammer network that says invite 3,000 and whatever people, right? Have you ever had that? Yep. So go ahead and press that. That'll get you started. Maybe not be quite the way you're planning, but it will get you started. Maybe don't recommend that one. But anyway, one of the things we want to think about is really encouraging and finding those people who are like-minded inside of your organization. So trying to identify some of the folks who are those informal leaders inside of your company and the people who will go the distance with you, right? The people who want to change and affect dramatic change inside of the company. So identifying some of those folks and know that they're in it for a long haul. You will do better on this. We have to have community. The essence of rolling out any of this enterprise social mechanisms is really understanding how we can put communities together inside of our organization, whether it's communities of practice or communities around the specific disciplines that we're looking at, but really how we create communities inside of the company. So we really want to have that core metric of people that's a group of people that we can go with and go the distance. As I talked about earlier, really thinking about edges defining the middle. So identifying the edge cases inside of your organization, identifying the variety and use cases, and the variety and type of use cases inside of your company are really important. And the other aspect of this is really understanding when you're first getting started, who's actually an engaged user. There's a very simple statistic on the Yammer dashboard. So if you go to yammer.com and then your network name and then /analytics, you're going to see the Yammer dashboard there. On there, there's a little thing that says engaged users. And engaged users is basically a way to notify how many people have liked a message, they've followed a group or a person, they've basically logged into the system, they've posted a message, they've replied, any of those kind of social gestures, right? So anytime that somebody's done that, that basically counts as an engaged user. And when you're first getting started, it's a good metric. It's not a great metric later on, but it's a good metric to get started with. And it's important to be able to at least be able to report on that. And that's generated for you automatically in the Yammer dashboard. So I recommend that you keep that up to date every 7 days or every 28 days.
I was just going to touch on too. So even as you progress and we talk about mature as a network and as a company using this, there are third parties that do provide even deeper analytics. Mm-hmm. There is even some best practices and some tips within the O365 network of what you can even do with Power BI and the data export that's available to everyone. Mm-hmm. So even apart from the analytics dashboard, there are other ways as you kind of grow that you're like, you know what, I want to learn a little bit more, even specific to this group kind of thing, mm-hmm. that allow users to dig and community managers to dig in deeper.
All right. One of the most powerful things inside of Yammer is this idea of being able to create serendipity, or at least engineer serendipity inside of organizations. And so what we want to do is serendipity are those happy accidents inside of the company where we're really putting people together and we're creating relationships and connections that we didn't know would be valuable before. So we want to have an idea of how to do this inside of our organization and how to track that success. So you probably know maybe the power user technique of being able to use #YamWin or whatever is effective inside of your organization. And every time a power user, maybe, or you can train the rest of your network to do it too, is to be able to look at conversations that wouldn't have happened if Yammer had existed, right? So it's one of those things in terms of being able to notify those conversations, hashtag them YamWin, and then being able to look through the conversations later on to see the documents of success, basically. So anytime there's a good conversation and you think it's a great connection because it happened because of Yammer, whether it's I reused a template or a praise was going on inside of your organization or something else that was a connection that wouldn't have been made without Yammer, go ahead, hashtag it YamWin, and count those things together. These are great stories. I found it really, really powerful with executives particularly. One of the things there is executives oftentimes, they often think about, okay, I want metrics, I want, how are we doing from a change management perspective? But I found that giving executives stories is a really effective mechanism inside of your organization. It's amazing how many times executives actually repeat stories over and over and over again in different places, right? They like that. Sharing stories is important. So anytime a success is demonstrated inside of your company, go ahead, hashtag YamWin, tell your executives about it, and they will help to float that around the organization. You'll be surprised how much adoption you get just from people telling stories. It's really important. So the last thing is really showcasing that to your executives, showcasing it to management. And oftentimes the resistance in our organization doesn't come from the very top. It comes from the middle layers. Have you seen that inside of your companies already? Right? It's kind of those middle managers there. And they feel like they're the conduit to the top, right? So why should these frontline workers who are sort of, down here kind of thing, really, how should they, be able to talk to executives at the top? So we have to demonstrate to them oftentimes how it is that they can win as part of this. And being seen as that relationship broker, being seen as that information channel is traditionally how middle management has operated, right? It's been important in the way that hierarchical companies have been organized. Showing them that how they can win in a different way is really important. So being able to show how collecting information from the field, being able to put connections together and show that there's wins across organizations is a great way to show that middle managers are adding value by seeing connections across the organization organization, and then being able to package that up basically for an executive audience. So always try to show how these middle managers can win, because oftentimes those folks are the yellow and red dots especially. It's oftentimes not the people at the highest levels of the company, because they have this broad strategic view of the organization. You want to think about those middle managers, how they win personally out of some of this social adoption journey. All right.
So we're going to jump into some of the truths about Yammer right now in Enterprise Social. So this is one of them. I mean, we touched a little bit even on the fact that Yammer will always be cloud earlier, but the user experience will always evolve. As IT people, we probably have seen this video or this picture be passed around before, just talking about the evolution. And one of the things that's really has changed with cloud services is the excuse me, is the fact that the rate of change is much more rapid. And one of the things that we do at Yammer, and now is taking place in much more within Office 365, is a lot of A/B testing. So you might see changes, and at times, as with everything, change can be difficult. But the intent and what we're doing is always going to be driving usage. It's always going to be driving further engagement. So we're looking at those metrics, we're looking at those pieces of information to try and really to truly make the productivity, to make productivity easier. It's kind of, I like to joke about even the Xbox One. How many have an Xbox One? Nice. And so, the voice recognition commands with the Kinect sometimes can be tricky, and I love it because if you're watching something and our kitchen feeds into our family room, and so I can be because I always am doing the dishes, where if I'm trying to watch something, I can just yell Xbox pause. Like that's been something I don't have to worry about. Where did I leave the remote type of thing. But there are also changes. My mom just told me when the last time she was at our house and she was watching the kids, and so she's downstairs and it's time to go to bed, and she was trying to shut the TV off, and she's saying Xbox off, and was trying to be somewhat quiet for the kids. And finally, one of them just yells, "Just go hit the button!" So there always is change management that comes along with a lot of this, with these evolving changes.
All right, community management. So, sugar and spice and all things nice, and hopefully, inside of your communities. But community management is that essential ingredient. It really is. I cannot stress that enough. We have some amazing community managers out in the Office 365 network and sitting in the audience here. So lovely, lovely, lovely people up front as well. And really understanding that those community managements inside of your organization are the people who are that sort of information broker, but they're also this connection machine inside of your organization. These folks are so passionate about what goes on and how to connect people and see the value in enterprise social. So really encouraging that kind of spirit inside of your company is so important, but really encouraging that you need to build community management resources. Whether it's allowing people to be able to do group management more effectively, or do administration, or just become power users and do that kind of training, it is truly an essential ingredient. So big truth inside of your organization.
I do want to say that Snips and Snails and Puppy Dog Tails could have also been on that slide.
I could have done that one. I went with chili because it's sometimes spicy.
That
sometimes.
So, enterprise social is just one of the tools of collaboration. That is the truth, and what we have talked about already with the messaging that's going on throughout this conference, that all these things are coming together. We've seen a lot of the new integrations. We talked already about the O365 groups, how we are looking at this as a productivity suite. I talked a little bit, my background, I came from the Yammer side, and when I talked even to my team that, okay, a lot of our role is changing. We're going from being just Yammer CSMs to now we're focusing on all of Office 365. I said, but really, our role's not changing. What we do is map technology to the business objectives and business problems of our customers. We're there to help make them successful. What's changed is we just got a lot bigger Swiss Army knife in our pocket now. We have more things to pull out and to use. And I think that's a very big key that even allows for what makes even a good customer success manager is trying to be creative and to work together with the customers to drive that adoption, to be creative and find, okay, I've hearing this problem. Let's go about let's approach it like this. So when you're going to execs, you shouldn't go and say, let me show you Yammer, and how do you think we could use it? You should be going to them and saying, I know we have, the last engagement survey showed that we had poor communication. I have a tool that can help us with communication. So it's really trying, even as within IT, and this is where we said Microsoft's here to help, you're doing that solution selling, you're doing that solution presenting within your own organization.
Mm-hmm. All right, another truth. Collaboration landscape is always changing, right? We've been in IT long enough, most of us, I suspect, in the audience, to know that this is very true, right? The tools are constantly changing, but it's not enough inside of our organization that all of the information needs inside the organization are also changing, right? And now it's becoming even more complex because really the relationships we have with external parties is becoming more and more important, right? So the more we have relationships with our customers, with suppliers, with partners, the need for external networks becomes even crucial. So the landscape is constantly changing, and it's going to be that truth all the time. There is no stasis in this, right? That's one of the things we have to get used to from an IT professional's perspective. So as we're rolling out these systems, we want to think about how we architect for change. We want to think about how we're architecting for the future. If we're thinking about collaboration needs and what it is that we're going to look at, we're going to need to look at all of those scenarios. However messy, however painful, right, we're going to need to architect for those things. So make sure that we have that as an established truth inside of the organization so that there are no surprises later on.
Another truth. Consumerization of IT is not just about the tools. Monkey see, monkey do. We all learn, behaviors are learned. And so you see the monkey on the bottom is mimicking what's on the top. And when we talk about consumerization of IT, it's not just about the tools. It's not just about the technology. It's also the behaviors of how we are utilizing technology. Today, if you need a plumber or an electrician, you're asking on Facebook. You're not going to the yellow pages that's on the phone stand because the phone stand's not there anymore because there's no phone to put on it. So the point is that even along with BYOD, the more mobilization of individuals and of your workforce, we're all expecting real-time information. And that's where consumerization of IT, all of these different terms, and bring your own device, those types of things are changing how we're expecting to work.
Mm-hmm. Our next one here is that everybody's social journey is different. Right? This is not one of those things where we can benchmark and say there's a best practice and this is exactly the route that you want to go against, right? And that oftentimes is uncomfortable for people inside of the organization, right? We want to say, well, in 90 days we can create this and whatever. We want to benchmark that against our competitors or our peers. And so it's a concern with social journeys. It's a journey on an individual level. It's a journey on the team level. It's also a journey on the business unit and your organization's level, right? So everybody goes through that social journey. It's whether you're becoming a green dot, from being a red dot, or whether you're going from an organization that hasn't had free-flowing information or transparent information inside of their organization, and really thinking about what that means at different levels of your company. So, this is the picture of Chicago. There are many ways of getting around to get to the same place, right? What you have to understand is that's the ingredient in terms of community management and figuring out what works inside of your company. You really have to hack your company's culture, right? You really do, because you have to understand what has worked in different implementations in the past and what ways we can actually empower success in the future. If we can figure out those different keys, then we can figure out how that social journey is going to change over time and make it interesting for folks.
And if you're not busy at the same time tomorrow, there is a session at 5 o'clock by Melanie Hohurst that is going to even talk a little bit about how some of that social journey has taken place, how she's helped cultivate some of that at an organization. She tells a story often about the email dinosaurs within her organization. And what she means by that is talking about, hey, there's some people that, going to Yammer or utilizing this was something that's difficult. They're so used to using email. That's how they've been communicating. Well, fine. That's okay. So let's set up Yammer. Let's set up you to respond to Yammer messages, see what's important to you via email. And, she's been doing that previous to Office 365 groups, all of this that's there. So it's just thinking of this is only going to get easier. And it's going to get easier for individuals to utilize and to work in the places that they are most comfortable, which will in turn make them more productive. Mm-hmm. Along those lines, managing identity is very important. You may recognize this man from previous sessions. If not, remember him or think of him as you go to sessions, later in the week.
That's right. It's just kind of like the guy. Remember the three folks that were on the SharePoint 2010 pictures, right? Every time you'd launch a team site, it was the same people over and over and over and over again, right? This guy is on every Microsoft presentation, right? So thinking about identity management, yeah, so one of those.
We've talked about deskless workers. We've talked about, who are you sharing with, whether it's concerning security policies. Managing identity is not going away. Managing and thinking about, okay, this group, who should be a part of it? Is this something that should be public? Is this something that should be private? And we're trying to do a lot, even with the different features that are coming out. And tying in the different security pieces. So you've probably heard of external sharing coming. Well, recognizing that with Office 365, we're going to tie in the Exchange transport rules to follow through into Yammer to help you protect your information in those same manners. So along those lines, it applies to all of the suite. It applies to everything you're doing. It's not just a technology issue. This is where you also have to talk about what is our security practices and make sure your users are mindful of what they are sharing and with whom.
Mm-hmm. All right. So with that, I just want to get the show of hands again. So who is on the IT Pro Network? Show me. Okay. All right. There's a few of you who are not. Why are the rest of you not on there? Okay. I do want to see if we can, I know we're running out of time a little bit, but it would be great if anybody has any myths that they would like to share inside of their organization, please don't be bashful and come up to the microphone and share them with us, and we'll try to help myth-bust them for you. But in the meantime, while you're thinking about that, please go ahead to the microphone. I did actually want to go ahead and go to the IT Pro Network and show you a little bit. In terms of what we can expect over there, because it is an important network for you to be part of, except that I'm getting a bunch of reminders that are out there. So the first thing I wanted to show you is the Yammer help group that's out here. So we have a good 2,600 people out there in the Yammer help group. It's a group that I help administrate. So if you're getting started inside of your organization and you need help in terms of what it is you can do, there's a great community out there, and you can actually come ask questions. And we have a bunch of notes that are curated in there. So really helpful stuff that tells you a little bit in terms of how I can do group naming, right? What's important? How do I keep the directory together? How do I do things like embed Yammer into SharePoint, right? So we have some great information out there and some resources there.
And I also just want to even, you are one of the administrators. I mean, so the beauty of this network is this isn't just a Microsoft push. This is real people out there at customers doing work and sharing how their best practices. So if you're not utilizing this resource, please check it out.
That's right. We have that Yammer. Thank you. Thank you, Daryl. I am a real person. Thank you. And yeah, we have this Yammer Enterprise social group, which is a much more collaborative group in terms of if you just want to have a talk about best practices, what's going on inside of your company, it's a great place to be. So, it's always appreciated when you come out here, and we will always be happy to interact with you out there. So please go ahead and be part of that. So I know we have a myth, at least one myth to share, so we'd love to hear from you.
I don't know if it's necessarily a myth, but when one of the things that I'm getting some pushback for, or wondering how we handle this, is the need to maintain that knowledge within the organization,
right,
but still have the legal policy, the retention policies that are followed. How do you balance the two there?
Mm-hmm.
So I can take it. Yeah. So I mean, there is a data export, and there are ways to set rules within data retention rules within Yammer. Some companies approach it a lot of different ways. Sometimes even just from an e-discovery perspective, they just take that data export and keep it on the shelf. And if something takes place, they run in case or they run different tools against it. We do have some companies that do pull. There are some third parties also that will help with archiving. And then there are some that even take like a hybrid approach that say, hey, a portion of our users are regulated. Well, they're utilizing the data export and the API to build something to take just those users' conversations and put them into their archiving system where their email is or IM, instant messaging is, but so there are ways to go about doing that. Oftentimes, the best thing is to kind of take, well, okay, what's legal, what's information protection want to do, and what's the right way. The other aspect, sometimes from a knowledge management or type of perspective, if there's ever anything, we've seen customers that cultivate information on their Yammer networks, and there might even be one of the champions that is following a specific group or a specific area, and they go, you know what, we want to make that a best practice. So they'll take that and put it into even a different system, or they'll tag it, and then that can help determine, hey, via the API, do I want to throw this into this system type of thing.
Good.
I don't know.
All right. So I just wanted to do some wrap up here, just because I know we're out of time, but hopefully this was good for you, at least in terms of defeating some of the common myths inside of your organization. Did you learn something? Yes? I see some head nods. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, I just want to check. Yes, you have to be. I'm a social person. You have to socially interact with me. That's how that works, right? So it's important. So we did go through some examples of those myths, but really what's figuring it out inside of your company is really important, right? You have to figure out those examples inside of your organization and basically create those new truths, right? So how we prove the business value of Yammer, how you engineer the use cases, how you prove the success of those use cases, making sure those metrics are in place that you can actually be measured against and achieve success against, right? Really important ways to actually create the new truth inside of your organization. It's really that social journey component of it. Every organization's one. Everybody's is different, right? There's some commonalities of stages you go along the way, but your journey is always different. You can try to learn from other people as much as possible, but it's always going to be this iterative and testing kind of approach that goes on. We have some resources out there.
Absolutely, yep. So this is also posted in the Yammer network. So the Ignite Yammer network, where this deck is. There are some other Yammer sessions. You have one tomorrow, or is that 1:30?
That's right.
Again,
that's right.
1:30. And I believe your partner in crime on that one might be in this room.
Right there.
Yeah,
he is right there. Yeah.
There we go. We also mentioned, blatant plug for Melanie's session tomorrow at 5. Also, if you're looking at being a productivity ninja, there is a session on Friday at 12. Sorry. There are some other Yammer sessions at 9. Actually, here's a big list of different sessions. But definitely utilize these resources, utilize the Ignite network, hit the other sessions after, and interact with us on the O365 network. We do approach this as a community.
Yes.
Some of us are Microsoft employees. Some of us are not. That's kind of the beauty of the community.
That's right. So we want to thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. So hopefully you guys, did you get your myths busted? Did it sound good? Yes?
Yes.
All right, good. All right. All right. So wanted to establish that.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, guys.